Welcome back to the One Question Leadership Podcast. I'm Glenn Caruso, head football coach at the University of St. Thomas, and so happy you tuned in. My dad was the single greatest man I ever met. He used to tell me, Glenn, I'm not going to tell you how to be a man. I'm going to be a man. I'm going to let you watch me, and you're welcome. That always struck me very deeply. My dad never intended to try and make my path easy or smooth or devoid of any hurdles. He understood that very strain and struggle was part of the journey that's going to make every one of us into the person that we're intended to be. I would encourage everybody to think when they're leading people that our job is to prepare the child for the path and not the path for the child. And remember, if we're doing it right, we're coaching football for life.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Our guest today is Anton Goff. Anton is a former athletics director at Bowie State, Hartford, and St. John's University. Greetings, Anton. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ty. Good to talk to you.
Now, Anton, the majority of your background is in development, and of course, you started your career in student-athlete development, and you've been in the profession for over 25 years. Of course, I know you from your stop at Michigan State when I was a student-athlete there, and you were working with student-athlete development there. So you have a wealth of experience, A, from actually having hands-on with student-athletes, but then B, with student-athlete development, and of course, your leadership roles as athletics director. Before we get started, I want to kind of address the elephant in the room. A lot of people that I know, we've always asked, why did Anton leave St. John's so abruptly? And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that abrupt departure from the AD position there at St. John's.
Yeah, not a problem. First of all, I don't think it's an elephant in the room. It was just a personal situation. What a lot of people know about me is that, I'm married with 2 kids, 2 daughters. But what a lot of people don't know is that they never moved to New York when I took the St. John's job. And so they stayed in Connecticut. And so we tried to work that out where me being down there in New York, I was living in New York, they were living up here in Connecticut. And after a while, after 2 years, it just became too much of a burden to handle from a personal standpoint. And, I have a 9th grader and I have a 6th grader, and they're both super active in sports. They're both, on high-level travel teams. One's in gymnastics, one's in volleyball. They're in extracurricular activities at school. And so, with my wife just being here by herself, me trying to get back and forth up the highway was just too much. And so, what we ended up doing is saying, hey, you know what, let's make the best decision for us as a family. And that was for me to come back home because I didn't feel like I could do the best job of being a husband and an athletic director at the same time with that living situation. And so I decided to come home and be with the family. And I can tell you this, I can't say enough good things about St. John's with the way they helped me. While I was there, they knew my situation, the support they gave me, and then the support they gave me when I left. I still maintain a lot of relationships down there. I've been a St. John's / Big East fan for forever. Growing up in Pittsburgh, I used to watch all the Big East games. My mom worked at the University of Pittsburgh, so I used to go to the Big East games back then. And for me, the Big East was, the ultimate basketball conference, and it's great to see the resurgence of them. I've always said that, the Big East truly shows its power when those 5 teams on the East Coast, St. John's, Georgetown, Villanova, Providence, and Seton Hall are all prominent on the national stage. But then adding those 5 teams in the Midwest really shored up his brand. And living here in Connecticut, I'm excited to see what comes next with UConn being added next year. And so I'm always going to be a fan of St. John's and always going to be a fan of the Big East.
I appreciate you giving us the insight on that situation at St. John's. But I also wonder, let's say another AD position comes up. Let's just hypothetically you get a job in January, right, somewhere out there where you are, or even if you got a job mid-year or end of the year, whatever it is, how would you guys address the situation now that you know that experience in the past?
Well, we definitely learned from it. So obviously, if we got a position, locally, then that wouldn't be a big deal. But say if I did have a position somewhere, outside of the immediate area, we've decided we would make that move as soon as possible. So most likely would be as soon as the girls were done with school. So say in June, then probably late June, make that move for the family. I'd go out there first and do that instead of trying to slow walk it. And, we're looking at years down the road and they're more entrenched. Like we would make that move a lot earlier this time. And, and that's something we've already discussed. And so, that's how we would handle it this time. And experience is the best tool for learning. I've always said, to everybody I've mentored. And so we've experienced it, and now we've learned. And so, you would think I've been in this business so long that, we'd be used to this. But like a lot of my moves before Bowie State, we didn't have kids. And then when we made the move up here to Hartford, we had kids, but they were super young, and we were able to make the move during the summer. And so this was a unique situation we hadn't experienced yet. And so I think we're better for experiencing it.
Right. I'd imagine the pressure, on your side of being an athletics director, pressure of making decisions, which is something you signed up for, right, can be hard when the family is around. And then on the other side, your wife, the pressure at home where she's almost living like a single parent, doing things, and you guys are making those decisions from afar, but it had to be tough on the family on both ends there.
Absolutely.
I wonder, Anton, in terms of, real quick, one more follow-up question on that, in making the decision for them to stay in Connecticut when you were at St. John's, tell me about the process you made for going into that. Obviously, when you get into these leadership positions, you make decisions and you evaluate decisions. And it sounds like after a couple of years, you guys evaluated the decision and decided it wasn't the best for you. But tell me about going into why you decided to live separately.
Well, we looked at, could we replicate our daughter's experience in New York as it is here? And we just couldn't. Like, we live in a smaller community. We have one of the best schools, not just in the state, but in the country that our kids go to. And like I said, the commitment of one in gymnastics, the other in volleyball, and the extracurricular activities that they're in, special chorus and things of that nature. They travel, not just all over the East Coast, but my daughter's actually going to Europe, to Rome, this spring break with our course. And so those type of things, I just didn't want to disrupt them at a young age. And if we were to move again, I think we would move as a family, but I would want to try to make sure that, it was a great fit, not just professionally, but personally. And so, great thing that we learned with the situation. And I think we've come out of it better and stronger.
Right. Yeah. Like you said, moving back home has probably helped out the whole family unit as a whole. And I imagine you have time now to be involved in your kids' lives in terms of what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some weekends my wife will take one of my daughters to volleyball and say, I'll go, with the other daughter to gymnastics. Well, when I was at St. John's, I wasn't able to do that. And, when we're talking about competing, we're talking about anywhere from Boston to Rhode Island to Philadelphia to New York. And so those are type of, travel plans that we've got to arrange for both of our daughters.
I appreciate you expounding on that St. John's and you leaving and those things. But the reason I have you on is what I know about you is you're a big relationships guy. You spend a lot of time in development. And I wonder, in terms of development, right? How do this is a curiosity question here. Do relationships, do they span to a new institution? Like if you built a relationship at Bowie State and then you moved to Hartford, or you built a relationship while you're at Hartford and you move over to St. John's, do those development relations, are they like specific to the institution, or are they like real friendship that expand beyond just a school? Have they moved with you, I guess the question is, to other institutions?
I think I've been fortunate enough that a lot of my relationships developed at one institution have moved to the next institution and have helped me. One example for me, when I took my very first athletic director's position, it was at Bowie State. And previously I was at University of Maryland. Now, Bowie State, for those that don't know, is right down the street from University of Maryland. So I was able to just really not disrupt anything on the family side and just come to Bowie State. But a lot of the donors that I knew at University of Maryland, because I had a good relationship with them, helped me out at Bowie State and helped me build facilities there. We were able to put in new turf, put in lights, put in a new weight room, a field house, things of that nature. And so, they actually helped me be successful at Bowie State. And so, and it's funny, I've got some relationships at Bowie State that knew some people at Hartford, and, maybe they didn't give at Hartford, but, one of the greatest things is being able to be introduced or having acquaintances in common. So, they hear that I'm going up to Hartford and they say, hey, I know this guy or this organization. You need to, I'll facilitate a introduction or something like that. And then I'm able to grow relationships from that. And so it's a lot easier when you have people advocating for you from another institution to the next institution. And, I think I've been fortunate since every single one of my institutions that I've sat in a chair at, they've been on the East Coast. And what it just proves is that the world is small and relationships people have up and down the East Coast were able to give me a leg up, just for the mere fact of, hey, when you go up there, here's some restaurants where you can eat at, you know what I'm saying? And same thing when I went from Hartford down to St. John's. There's a lot of, industry people here, in insurance and business and things of that nature that I got a chance to know at Hartford that have relationships in New York because a lot of the headquarters were down in New York, or they just knew people in New York, or they had previously lived and worked in New York and now came up here to Hartford. And so they're saying, hey, I got a guy down in New York you need to meet. And then, what came about was that I got a chance to meet them, develop a relationship with them, and where they weren't supporters before, sometimes they become supporters, and so, it's just a unique thing with this business, and, with social media and things, the world is just so small, and I've been able to leverage those relationships from each institution that I've been at.
In terms of relationships, I tend to think of relationships are developed through touch points, right? Whether it be phone calls, letters, emails, in person, you see somebody, you speak to them, right? The more touch points, the more people get familiar and comfortability. And then you go from being a colleague to a friend, I guess you would say. In working in development, I wonder how a relationship, do they get past, and this is, you have to forgive me for being uneducated in terms of development. I've never done it, but how does a relationship get past the underlying or understood notion that at some point there will be an ask, right? From there to being a genuine friendship? Or, like what you just sound like it's not always a business relationship. You've actually developed genuine friendships through your work in development. Talk to me about that point. Essentially, how do you do that in terms of what you're working?
I think two words, and I've mentored many people who are now ADs, and I think I tell them all the time and trust. I think you have to spend time with people in order to develop their trust. And what I mean by that is just making sure that you're transparent on what you're trying to do. Obviously, if they're a potential donor, they know at some point there's going to be an ask. And that's just part of the business. It's a lot of the responsibility of an AD. But I think that part of that is just you getting to know them getting to know you, what you're about, and people give for a lot of different reasons. You look at the list of reasons people give, and some of it is they want access to a particular program or to particular individuals, or they want recognition somehow, whether it's a name on a building, a name on a field, or just their name somewhere in a program. You got people that give because they believe in the organization, they believe in the cause of the organization. They give to an individual just because they trust that individual, and some people give because they feel like they've had a great experience with that organization or with a sports program, and they feel like they're obligated to pay that back for the next person, or is a combination of any of the things I just listed. And so I think when you're spending time with somebody, you're trying to find out why they're giving and what reasons they're giving, so you can understand as you're developing that relationship and you're talking about what their support can do for the organization, how you can make it out. I've always tried to make a relationship to be a partnership instead of a transaction. Like, I want people to feel like they're a partner in what we're trying to do. And I felt like the only way you could do that is to allow them to understand why you're doing what you're doing and how they can be a part of it, and what their support means to you, and to make sure they're appreciated for that support. And I didn't care if you gave $100 or $1 million. I wanted you to feel like a partner, and I wanted you to feel appreciated. And I think over time, then natural friendships, natural relationships develop, because then you start finding out what you have in common. Yeah, commonalities, what I'm saying, outside of just, hey, this organization we're interested in, but outside of that, whether it's food, whether it's, hobbies and golf and whatever it may be. And then you start spending time, once again, outside of that. And sometimes you get to the point where you're not even talking about, the actual donation. You're just talking about life and figuring out, how you can support each other.
Right. I was at NACDA last June, and I actually met a lot of young people of color who are in development, which I think is a great thing. And you've been doing it, I guess. So let me ask this question here. In the 25 years, at what point did you cross over from student athlete development to development? And how long were you in the profession before you made that transition?
Yeah. So for me, it was probably in 2004 when I went back to Maryland my second time, and I was overseeing all of academic support, career development, community service, all that for the University of Maryland. And I started kind of being hybrid. Like, I was also sports supervisor. I started getting into fundraising then. So ever since then, I've kind of like started transitioning, because I knew at some point I wanted to be an athletic director, and I needed to start getting my feet wet in that area. And so, I really started delving deep into that and figuring out, the lingo and what it was about. And I found out, that there's no great secret to fundraising. It's a lot of hard work, and like you said, it's a lot of touch points, and part of it's personality, and part of it's being able to be a great communicator. But I always felt like most of it was just being genuine about who you were and what you were trying to accomplish, and how that individual or how that group could help you accomplish those goals, which hopefully were mutual goals.
Right. I wonder, when you made that transition, and we've had this conversation in the past. I think when I first started hosting this podcast, I imagined the leadership at the time at Maryland had to give the blessing. Was it something you initiated, or you saw a spot where you could bring value to the organization, or was that something that the current administration at the time asked you to get involved in?
No, absolutely. Debbie Yao, who was the athletic director then, I had worked for her previously. Before coming up to Michigan State, I was at University of Maryland, and after Michigan State, I went back to University of Maryland. So she knew my goals of, career goals of wanting to be an athletic director, and so she supported me wholeheartedly and allowed me to, piggyback on some of the things that we were doing, and allowed me to venture out and do some things on my own. And that was some valuable experience that I was able to take to Bowie State, and, found my way at Bowie State, then to Hartford, and then St. John's.
Right. Excellent. I'll ask this last question here, and then we'll wrap. I mentioned I met a lot of young people of color, and there are a lot of young people in general, not just people of color, who are in development, and everybody at all times are trying to figure out how to be successful at it. Even people who will try to follow your footsteps and work in student athlete development but want to make that transition. I wonder if you have 2 or 3 points of advice for people who may be listening, who possibly want to either make that transition or who are in development now and want to be successful at it, maybe on the way to be an athletic director, or even if they just love what they're doing now, but they work in development or want to work in development. Can you give us any advice?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you got to be yourself. I think people can tell when other people aren't genuine, or they're giving off a fake persona. So, you got to be yourself first and foremost. But I also think that individuals should seek out other individuals to get mentored by. If you know somebody who's successful in a certain area, seek them out for advice, for mentorship, because it's a great experience to have somebody who's already done it, that's doing what you're trying to do, that can tell you, how to get there, or how to avoid some of the pitfalls that they had, and avoid some of those obstacles, and have a sounding board. Think that's, and then the other thing I feel like, especially those individuals who are on the student services side, like a lot of them feel like I could never ask anybody for money, or I could never, do the fundraising part. And so I think what I would tell people is, don't box yourself in. Fundraising is similar to presentations that you give to parents and coaches and potential student athletes that you want, that you're trying to recruit to get to your institution. You're telling them a story. You're telling them, what they can benefit from if they come to your institution and spend the next 4 years there or whatever. And it's kind of the same thing with fundraising. Like, you're explaining the story of how their support can help you guys reach your goals, and hopefully they're buying into the same goals that you're trying to achieve. And so, those are the 3, quick nuggets that I would give to, and I continue always to give to young people that I meet or reach out to me that I've mentored in the past, or I've spoken to at leadership academies or things of that nature.
All right. So essentially, be yourself, find a mentor, and don't be afraid to go out your comfort zone, because what you're doing now may actually tie in to what they do over in development.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Anton,
Yep.
This has been an excellent conversation. I appreciate your mentorship over the years, and I appreciate everything you've done here for college athletics. Thank you very much for joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Oh, not a problem. Thanks for having me, man. I'm proud of what you're doing, and keep doing your thing, Ty.
That was Anton Goff. He's former athletic director at Bowie State, Hartford, and St. John's University, of course, with 25 years in college athletics. And of course, this is Ty Brown with the One Question Leadership Podcast. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.